It's time to punch evil in the face. Welcome to Arkham Wednesdays as we continue our long road to Arkham Knight. Because you requested it, we are revisiting Arkham City. You're welcome. While chatting about one of Batman's most laughable foes. That's right, it's Killer Moth. Surprisingly, a viewer requested this lore episode. Thank you so much. Much love to you for making me do all this research, because Killer Moth is not one of my favorite villains. But that being said, if you're new to my channel or you've been around for a while, tell me how you found out about my various Arkham games or the other games that I've covered, or if you have something you want to see for the next Batman-centered video. So, Killer Moth, where do I begin? Wow, while never officially appearing in the Arkham games, he was mentioned in a scene or two in Arkham Asylum. There's also this part in the game where Batman found a skeleton in a cocoon hanging in the garden somewhere, and they do this brief bio on Killer Moth. Now in Arkham City, Penguin's Museum actually has a display case filled with moths that you can find. So some people think that Killer Moth was inside it at one time, but now the contents are empty. That or Penguin just likes having moths in there. Could also be an homage to the episode where Killer Moth and Penguin worked together in the Batman 2004 series. Or it could just be a display case filled with different moths. So there you go, there's his connection to the Arkham games, kind of. Now, we don't know if he's going to appear in Arkham Knight or not. It's probably likely that I'll get some type of mention, like a character thing or Easter egg. Maybe some thug will say, hey, Killer Moth is a joke, because he is. Or, you know, maybe there'll be a flyer or something for pest control, I don't know. Those type of Easter eggs, they're likely. Though it would be funny to see the foe show up, I have to say. He was in LEGO Batman 1 and 2 after all, though he was pretty stupid. Anyway, the character first appeared in Batman number 63 in 1959, created by Bill Finger. In the beginning, the foe didn't have a name though, he was just this unknown criminal guy. He adapted a similar costume to Batman's and became hired muscle during the golden age for the bad guys. His secret identity was that of a millionaire playboy named Carmen Van Cleer. We're just gonna call him Clear or Claire, whatever, or Von, I don't know. It should be noted too that this millionaire persona was actually fake. He didn't have an identity, he's just an unknown criminal who creates this millionaire guise. You know, something goofy that the guy came up with. What's funny about this character though is he actually becomes pals with Bruce Wayne while he's pretending to be a millionaire. By night, he visits Gotham's underworld and hands out moth signals for thugs to signal him when Batman and Robin put the squeeze on crime. Because yeah, any, you know, self-respecting rogue would love to take a flashlight and, you know, put the Moth signal in this. No, they wouldn't. Moth during the Golden Age was pretty much a carbon copy of the Dark Knight. He had a moth cave, a mothmobile, and even moth gadgets. Though he didn't shy away from using guns and other weapons, because, I mean, he is a killer. I mean, you know, you hire a guy to do a job. He's essentially a hitman in moth gear. His helmet is actually equipped with radio equipment, which is something I never knew, inside his antenna, so he could listen to the police scanner, police radio, whatever you want to call it. His first outing, he actually rescued some criminals and captured Robin, so he wasn't a complete failure in his introduction. His plan was stupid though, and his terms for Robin's release was to see inside of the Batcave. Yeah, not to learn Batman's true identity, nope. It's to see how Batman decorated his Batcave. I'm not lying, it was all about furniture placement. So right there, Killer Moth loses points. Upon agreeing to Killer Moth's request, Robin escapes and Batman isn't in the mood to play the awkward house guest, you know, showing off the Batcave. So they brawl and Killer Moth, like, basically plunges 1,000 feet into the Gotham River. Never to be seen again until 2 months later when Killer Moth returns. Which, yeah, there you go. His comeback is short-lived though, because Moth tried to steal something at a museum showcasing moths, so he becomes a generic villain that always steals his motif. Killer Moth did try to discover Batman's secret identity, which earns him some points, but he failed and accidentally revealed his own secret identity, that of the millionaire Von Leer Clear guy. And what's funny, after he fights Batman and swears revenge when he escapes, and he's getting ready to get in his bathrobe and relax, put on his slippers, right outside the door is the police arresting him in his home. So, yeah, Killer Moth, he sucks. After escaping prison during the Golden Age, Killer Moth, he visits a plastic surgeon and comes out looking exactly like Bruce Wayne, which is something Hush ends up doing very similar in DC's Dark Age and, of course, Arkham City, so this game. Anyway, in Detective Comics 173, Batman's Double, which is the name of the comic, Von Clear's surgery is spot on, and it's so good that Dick Grayson is fooled into bringing the imposter to the Batcave, because the guy looks like Bruce Wayne. Moth then dons the famous cape and cowl and makes Batman appear afraid of Killer Moth. That makes so much sense, because bats and moths would fear one another. Not really. Somehow, while being dressed up as the Bat, Killer Moth is gunned down by his own gang, which is ironic, though he doesn't die because this is the Golden Age, people. People could survive lots of Tommy gun fire even if they weren't Superman. Von Clear does end up getting amnesia, though, from so many bullets to the face, forgetting who he was, and he goes to jail yet again. Once the Silver Age rolled around, Killer Moth was reestablished again, though given no origin this time around. His costume, though, proved to be more of a challenge than the person inside of it. As with most Silver Age / Bronze Age stories, by magic, Moth's costume comes to life and went on a crime spree because the writers thought it would be a good idea. Don't look at me, I don't write this stuff, it was the 60s. Batman eventually defeated the Moth and his costume in some Justice League issue. I forget the name, I don't really care. It's kind of an embarrassment. Killer Moth was back to cause problems later, though, for Gotham in the flesh for Batgirl's reintroduction in 1967, which I'm sure we've talked about. I'm getting a Matrix thing, like a moment where there's like a black cat running around, there's a glitch, because I know we've talked about this before, to hype up the heroine's appearance in Adam West's Batman show. You know, Killer Moth was reintroduced, and Batgirl, you know where I'm going, because we have gone over this. Killer Moth had extorted money from his millionaire pals and attacked Bruce Wayne's car. Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl, shows up with the Batgirl theme, you know, Batgirl, that theme, and beats the tar out of Moth and his crew. She was actually on her way to a costume ball and stopped to just be a good Samaritan, and, well, she ended up kicking butt. So there you go. This story was actually going to be used for Batgirl's Batman pilot, but it worked out differently how she appeared in the series, which I forget, but I'll be able to discover how she became Batgirl when the series releases on November 11th, like the entire 66 Adam West show. So some of these things that I'm a bit foggy on, like Lord Fog, I'll figure out on November 11th. This is not a product placement. I'm just totally buying that, just so you know. Anyway, Mothballs traps Batgirl with his moth gun and runs away. Bruce leaves and returns as Batman to save Barbara. That night, Bruce Wayne challenges Mothman, and he won't leave his home after declaring a challenge with a written letter or something like that. Killer Moth actually becomes enraged, and after 3 days, goes and shoots Bruce Wayne. Batgirl arrives too late, and distraught, she tries to attack Killer Moth with a righteous fury and ends up failing. But once Batman and Robin show up, then the audience is like, oh, that's not really Bruce Wayne lying in his own blood. That's a dummy. And even Batman and Robin are like, oh, don't worry, Batgirl, that's just a dummy. Like the guy who wrote this story. Moth escapes, and the dynamic trio go after him. See what I did there? By following the Mothmobile. Oh, wow, I don't ever want to... If somebody requests Crazy Quilt, I quit. Seriously, I will quit. Anyway, Batman and Robin are taken hostage in some odd 60s death trap thing, and of course, Batgirl is the one to save them, because that makes so much sense for someone who just appeared as a costumed vigilante, that she would know how to stop costume villain's death trap. How Batgirl saves them as she uses some type of gadget on her belt, and then Killer Moth goes missing, and everybody's like, even Batman's like, it appears Killer Moth got away. And Batgirl's like, nope, I'm actually secretly a bloodhound. And she sniffs out where Killer Moth is hiding because of the scent her perfume left when she kicked him in the face earlier in the comic. Yeah, not like Robin the Teen Wonder couldn't have done that. I mean, girl's perfume would be kind of a big deal for him. It's not like he couldn't be able to smell it. But whatever, Batgirl uses her Bloodhound skills, tracks Killer Moth, and that's the end of the comic. Because of this issue though, Detective Comics 359, Killer Moth has been associated with Batgirl forever. In fact, in the 2003 miniseries, which I know more about, Killer Moth was linked to the creation of this Batgirl again in Batgirl Year 1, where he ended up teaming up with Firefly, essentially creating him to be Moth's sidekick, which was actually a pretty funny concept, Killer Moth and Firefly teaming together to be the ultimate, evil duo. But, of course, things don't go their way. In the book, Moth is a killer, though. He's just clumsy at times, but he's still a killer. I mean, you don't want to mess with the guy, even though he looks like a joke. Without spoiling too much, because I really love this fantastic book that recreates Batgirl's story for the modern age and has lots of Easter eggs for Batman the Animated Series fans and 60s Batman fans and Bronze Age fans. If you by chance can't get a copy to read, I strongly suggest you watch the motion comic, which is on Hulu and Amazon, I believe. It's fantastic, and Bruce Timm was actually going to make like an animated movie based on Batgirl Year 1 and the romance between Robin and Batgirl, which would have been awesome. I'm a huge Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon shipper, and I would have just ate that movie up, but it never happened. In fact, they even teased something like that in the finale of Batman Brave and the Bold, where there was going to be this CGI Batgirl Year 1 show, and of course it didn't happen. So that was Batmite trolling us. Let's see. Killer Moth. What else do I know about this clown? Oh, Killer Moth went on to appear in various Legion of Doom type team-ups, which was very common for the 70s. Different Batman and Superman rogues, like, having tea and plotting the demise of said clad weirdo superhero guy. Though nothing really noteworthy ever came up. He was in essentially what became the trial episode in Batman the Animated Series. He was originally one of Batman's rogues that put Batman on trial, and that one lady, which I forgot her name, probably pop into my head near the end of this episode. But it was a pretty interesting episode, but he was actually a part of that original comic, as considered one of Batman's greatest threats. Yes, that makes so much sense. But in all purposes, he mostly stayed as a Batgirl foe and became her arch nemesis, more or less, after being teamed with different baddies like the Cavalier, which surprisingly is another millionaire turned bad guy, and Gentleman Ghost, who's, well, dead. Eventually, in the 1980s, Moth returned to his roots as a paid bat protection bad guy. So the mob would pay him to, protect them from Batman or something. And for the most part, it kind of worked. I mean, Moth was interesting in the 80s. He didn't talk much, and he wasn't such a goofball, but there's really no stories worth mentioning, honestly. He did appear during the final battle of Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is, essentially DC's reset button, though we didn't really appear again until the 1990s. But when we come back, we will cover Killer Moth in the 90s and other media, so enjoy this random commercial break because I can. Alright, boys and girls, by post-crisis, Killer Moth's real name is revealed and he's given a new origin, I think. Or either that or it's a completely different character. But anyway, Drury Walker, whatever his name is, was an unsuccessful criminal whom nobody took seriously at all. He was the butt of all of DC's jokes more than he ever was before. He's even referred to by the Justice League as Batman's punching bag. Heck, even Walker considers himself a second-string bad guy. That's pretty bad, folks. While incompetent, this Moth is still kind of a killer, or he has that killer mindset, but he's still pretty much a joke. During the Shadow of the Bat issue number 7, Killer Moth gathers a team of third-string bad guys, Catman and Calendar Man, some other person I can't remember, and they plan on kidnapping Bruce Wayne and some other millionaires to hold for ransom. Though, the two other guys learn that Killer Moth actually plans to ice Wayne and the others. And for some reason, this leads to the end of that Misfits partnership, and Killer Moth is once again seen as a failure in the comic book world. Tired of being the butt of the DC universe, eventually though, Killer Moth sells his soul and becomes a moth monster. Though having been tricked by Neuron, Moth actually loses his mental capacity and essentially becomes a drooling danger to the world and himself and everybody around him. He just goes around putting people in cocoons and eating them, because that's what mutated monster things do. Though he's still able to speak, kind of, more like Hulk speak, Moth speak, eat you, that kind of stuff. That book, if you're wondering, I think it has to do with Underworld something. I forget, but it was a miniseries in 1995 for DC Comics, and in that book, Neuron goes to Batman and he asks him to resurrect Jason Todd, and Batman's like, no way, I'm not doing that. He also visits Nightwing and asks him something. Nightwing says no. Joker actually sells his soul for a box of cigars, which, that is something the Joker would do. Oh, and that's also how they explain Lex Luthor being alive and no longer having cancer and all this other stuff. He gets healed by that, but Joker and him betray Neuron and some other things. But Killer Moth, he's still this freaky, monster thing. But he seems to like the change, I guess. I mean, he's got powers, and people are scared of him because they don't want to be eaten. What's interesting about this Killer Moth creature, though, is he doesn't really end up a Batman villain anymore. He kind of becomes like a DC villain, sort of. He does end up fighting Nightwing and the Titans at some point in the late 90s. He also gets put into Arkham by Lockup in 1996. I remember this guy. I'm sure you do too. Here's a picture of him. He first appeared in the animated series and was created by Paul Dini. Basically a non-Venom Bane clone. And, he's a security guard turned crazy. As to what else this monster can do, well, he can lay eggs which hatch into Killer Moth clones of himself before he turned into the monster. So, yeah, have fun being surrounded by all of that. He also has acid, breath, and super strength, and cocoon powers. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, that's all weird, but what about today? What happened to Gotham's giant Killer Moth creature? Well, he was killed by Superboy Prime when he ripped him in half during the Battle of Metropolis. See, Superboy here was a tool DC used to remove a lot of its past mistakes all the time. Like explaining how Jason Todd just randomly came back to life. It was because of Superboy Prime Punch! Hitting the fabric of the time stream, or the Speed Force, or something. If I remember correctly too, Killer Moth appeared in a Booster Gold comic or two. And Booster's books are really confusing for me, so I've only read a couple of them. But even though they're funny, they're pretty strange, and they make my head hurt. But in the book, what I vaguely remember, and I'm probably gonna have some things off, just so you know, Killer Moth never became a moth creature and rules Gotham City as its overlord. And Booster Gold has to go back in time to set things right, sort of. So this story is really bizarre, and yeah, that's really all I should tell you, but let's give it the old college try, shall we? During a museum heist, Killer Moth is confronted by the dynamic duo and Batgirl. Somehow, Barbara bumps into a time traveler criminal named Willie or something and breaks his time gadget, sending Batgirl and Killer Moth and his henchmen all back in time. The time traveler is then arrested by Gordon, or was it Bullock or Montoya? I forget, it's one of those. Once people are sent back, Gotham in the present point in time is altered into a city run by the bad guys. A criminal utopia where Batman never came to be, at all. And Booster Gold then decides to travel back before the heist so he can impersonate Killer Moth and make things right this time, or at least attempt it. So in the past robbery, Dalbert, the time criminal, had given Walker, Killer Moth, the plans to rob, Gotham's museum or whatever. Shortly after the time guy leaves, Booster Gold appears, knocks out the real Killer Moth, and takes his costume, and becomes a fake Killer Moth, and then says, hey henchmen, let's go rob this museum, I got the plans, and the henchmen are like, woohoo! So then, as they're in the middle of the robbery, Batman and Robin show up, of course, to stop the crime, as does Batgirl, and Booster Gold, being the awesome guy that he is, with superpowers, defeats Batman, Robin, and Batgirl, and his henchmen are just kind of like, when did that happen? And he's like, you don't need to know that. And they're like, okay, let's just keep stealing the art. So Booster Gold beats Batman and Robin, and then the time-traveling criminal shows up and gets a share of the loot, and Booster Gold goes back to the future, and the time criminal goes back to his future. But back in the present Gotham, stuff has changed yet again. Shocker. This time the Moth signal shines in the sky and Killer Moth controls Gotham as its leading supervillain, I think. Having gained street cred for basically killing Batman. So after Booster Gold defeated Batman, the real Killer Moth appeared and killed Batman. And then became like the ultimate bad guy. And everybody was like, wow, Killer Moth, you're so cool. And he's like, I know, right? Booster then is like, oh man, I messed up again. So he goes back in time, takes a Batman costume this time, and beats up Killer Moth, thus creating somewhat normal time stream, except now Batman's like an overlord or something. So this time around, the final time, mind you, he and his sister Goldstar, who I don't really remember what she did, I just remember Skeet. They only had Skeet in that Justice League series, but Skeet, Goldstar, and him go back to the past for the robbery heist. She steals one of Batgirl's costume, and Booster Gold is like, okay, dressing as Batman was not helping anything, so I'm gonna be Elvis. And Elvis is the one who joins Batman, Robin, and Batgirl, who's Goldstar, and they defeat Killer Moth. And then that restores the original timeline before all that other stuff happened. And that is what Booster Gold's books are like, okay? It's just weird. Doesn't make any sense. That's what it is. That's why I don't read a lot of it. But I really hope, I will say this, I really, really hope that the Booster Gold that's in the new 52 right now, who's from the pre-52, post-crisis era, ends up somehow making a thing that resets the new 52 back to the pre-52 or post-crisis, and then everything would be better. And not all this jumbled mess that is the new 52 and Future's End and all this other crap that I don't really care about. So yeah, there you go. So what happened after the Moth died, or Walker died, or the passing of whatever? So just like with Prometheus, there are different people that come and use that persona. So there's different Killer Moths, but some of them aren't really worth mentioning at all. There are a couple guys that are pretty cool. Take this new guy, all in black. He had an updated getup. He appeared in Batman 652. That's it. This Killer Moth is a skilled fighter and could even best Robin in combat. He even worked with Firefly and Lockup. Lockup was used a lot during this time in the Gotham Underground series, I believe, or was it Gotham Underworld? One or the other. Though he did die during a shootout with Tobias Whale, who we will talk about in later Arkham series because he is mentioned in the Arkham games. A possible clone of Walker is actually beaten to a pulp by the Atom during the Justice League miniseries Cry for Justice, where Prometheus is the main bad guy. We actually talked about it in a previous Arkham Wednesday, so if you want more information on that story, then you could go back and rewatch that and learn stuff. I really think that this is a clone of Walker, or Drury, or Dreary, or whatever his name is, because he is a weakling and runs away from Red Robin, thinking that the guy is after him like the Atom is. So he runs tail from Robin when he's trying to, like, ice this random guy in New Mexico or something. I think that's where it takes place. During the Blackest Night, the Moth Monster, though, comes back as a Black Lantern, so then we have Killer Moth Human and Black Lantern Moth Monster alive at the same time, or, well, I mean, technically the thing's a zombie, but they're around at the same time, which should technically, you know, destroy the space-time continuum, having two Killer Moths at one place at one time in the time stream, but it doesn't. Killer Moth Monster, ironically, is killed by Superboy Prime again, and I think that he's responsible for the death of a lot of Black Lanterns when he goes. I think he gets thrown into the Black Lantern battery and then explodes. So, I mean, it doesn't get ripped in half again, but he still dies. During the new 52, a new Killer Moth appears, hired by Richard Dragon to take out Green Arrow. So, again, Killer Moth is not really a Batman-centered figure anymore. He's more of like a DC shared joke. Although he kind of looks very emo. They kind of went like Lobo on him, a little bit like Lobo redesign. He looks like a mixture of the old Ratcatcher from pre-52 and, well, I mean, just, there's the picture of him. There you go. See? He looks freaky. That is the new Killer Moth. And no, we have no idea what his identity is at this time or what the character will be like in the future, but that's him. As for other media, Killer Moth, again, he's mostly just a joke character. He first aired on the Teen Titans. That was his first known appearance. The only one that people had seen. They never saw the Batgirl pilot because it was never released to television. You could only see that at conventions and other things. But in the episode, I forget the name of it, but Killer Moth has a daughter named Kitten. I'll never forget that name because it's just so weird. And his daughter is smitten with Robin because, you know, her name's Kitten and smitten. I like doing that kind of stuff. She wants Robin to take her to prom, And Robin's like, no way, you know, I have a crush on Starfire or whatever. You know, the thing between Robin and Starfire actually gets jealous in the... It's a cute episode, okay? So Killer Moth basically takes Jump City hostage with, like, mutated moth things and forces Robin to take his daughter to prom. Eventually, Robin finds a way to defeat Killer Moth with the help from Starfire and the other Titans, and then Starfire and him dance at the end of the episode on a ship, or was it on the dock? I don't remember, but it's cute, and you always see it in the AMVs online, you know, for Starfire and things like that. He appeared in some other Titans episodes during the series, and he was in the finale of the show. He's also responsible for giving Starfire her pet, Silky, which you always see her with in the Titans Tower, and you currently see Silky a lot in Titans Go. No matter what you feel about that, that's what happens. Silky is in the show a lot. The weak Silver Age-like character appears in the 2004 Batman show, and he works for Team Penguin. This is a pretty hilarious episode, and one of the only 2004 Batman episodes that I actually thought was well written, and it's because it's just a huge comedy. Like, Penguin has this idea to create, like, essentially an A-team of bad guys, so he gets Killer Croc and, like, Ragman or something, or Ragdoll, I forget who it is, but it's a guy who's like a contortionist, and then the Penguin and Killer Moth and one other guy, and they create like this team of bad guys, and they actually do pretty well, like stealing stuff, but they're always stealing Penguin-themed stuff, which is kind of like a jab at the 60s and Silver Age, where villains were always stealing stuff that was based on their character, so I thought that was pretty clever. But Killer Moth, he is not even considered a C-lister in this cartoon, and even Penguin sees this guy as a joke, and they give him kind of like, he kind of talks like this, I'm Killer Moth, you know, so it's just like, it's funny. He has a gun that shoots acid, and he has another gun that'll make like a cocoon or something, but mostly he just gets Penguin coffee and the rest of the Penguin team, or Team Penguin, while he's out and about on one of his gopher missions to get the team food or pizza run or whatever. He's harbinging like some chemicals in the back seat of his truck, and the chemicals leak. I know it's not funny because, well, it is kind of funny because the whole time he's saying, and Killer Moth succeeds, and, you know, and he's coughing and doing all this other stuff. But the chemicals, the radioactive stuff, ends up turning Killer Moth into Monster Moth, which we saw from the Neuron 90s thing and some other stuff. But what is great about the writers who did this is Killer Moth, even as this giant mutated monster that's very imposing, mind you, is still an idiot. Yeah, he has acid breath, he can fly, and has super strength, but the guy is a moron. This is one of my favorite roles that Jeff Bennett has ever done. It was so funny, and I highly suggest you guys watch the episode. You'll probably be able to find it. But it's one of the Batman episodes. Very well written, very hilarious. Killer Moth did appear in Batman Brave and the Bold, though he sounded like Cobra Commander, which that was kind of odd. Anyway, this version of the character is Walker 2, so he's a clumsy idiot. He wears a similar costume to his Silver Age counterpart, and most of the people in Brave and the Bold are wearing Silver Age costumes, like very 1950s, 1960s. He mostly gets beat up by Batgirl, and appears in a lot of mini episodes, but what's really funny is, once again, he is a connection between Batgirl's appearance and something. Like, in Batgirl's first mini episode that introduces her to the world of, you know, Batman Brave and the Bold, she arrives to save Batman while beating up Killer Moth. And then Killer Moth just has, like, cameos with Batmite and all this other stuff in the series. I don't really remember all the other ones, but I don't think he ever had a full episode. As for video games, aside from the Arkham stuff we already talked about, Killer Moth was in the NES adaptation of the first Batman film in 1989, which was awesome. He was the first stage end boss, and then he appeared in the sequel game, which was Batman Return to the Joker, which is a really cool NES game, but it's really hard. I still love it though, I reviewed it years ago. Drury Walker, whatever his name is a playable character in LEGO Batman 1 and 2. He's dumb and distracted by bright lights. He likes to fly into them. In fact, in LEGO Batman 1, when you capture the guy or you're gonna fight him, you see him like taking his little wings and flying up to the Batwing that is hovering and has its light, and you just facepalm because you're like, dude, that's how you're gonna get caught. But you know, it's comical, it's funny. His Teen Titans costume is actually in the Nintendo DS version of the game, but this was before, you know, Lego characters could be huge. So it's just your generic Lego costume. The character will of course be playable in Lego Batman 3 this November. And you know what? I think that's gonna conclude this, ladies and gentlemen. In the comments section below, tell me what character you'd like to see get the lore treatment in the next Batman Arkham Wednesdays. Mash that like button if you learned something, because I'm sure you have. And thanks for taking the time to watch another Arkham Wednesdays. God bless and happy gaming. Joker, take us out, because I'm done.